Working with negative shape in a positive way. Lines or one-dimensional forms are the most logical way to start drawing because our most basic tools create lines as we move them across the surface of our paper. But shapes or two-dimensional forms are perhaps the most important part of our pictures because when we are working on paper or a computer screen, we're making two-dimensional images. Negative shapes are literally all around us, but they are usually not what we are thinking about as we're concentrating on the subject that demands our attention. Here in a bold font, we can see negative shapes around the letters and occasionally a negative shape contained within a single letter. A contained shape is called a counter. This idea of counters will be important to our ability to work with negative shapes. When we're making two-dimensional images, the overall composition is a structure of positive and negative shapes. We might think of them like puzzle pieces. The success or failure of our design hinges on the control of the compositional shapes. Look at how interesting the negative shapes are in this composition by Paul Gauguin of Jacob wrestling the angel. When we isolate the negative shapes, we see how interesting and solid these forms are. Gauguin also emphasized the negative shape by making it bright red, whereas the main subject is black and white. Notice that I referred to it this time as negative space, the space around things. You will often hear this, but I generally prefer the term negative shape, which emphasizes the flatness of the picture plane. We might also think back to our introduction to right and left brain thinking. Just to hear the terms positive and negative shape clearly shows our prejudiced use of words to prefer one over the other, as we associate positive with good and negative with bad. To override these positive-negative terms, we can use the terms figure and ground. Our Western philosophy emphasizes material things, possessions, objects, but Eastern philosophy is more holistic in realizing the juxtaposition of counterbalanced forces that make up the complexity of life. The duality of yin and yang can help us to think about negative shape. For every force, there is an opposing force. As we start to draw from life, we often think about drawing a thing, a person, an object, a building, and we place it somewhere in the middle of our page to fit the rectangle. But we're only vaguely thinking of the space around it, or the importance of that space to the structure and success of our image. The figure, or positive form, is whatever holds our attention. If we think about the state we are in and draw its shape, that is in our mind the figure. But if we're from Indiana, then we would draw this shape as the positive form. From each of our perspectives, the other is a negative shape. So when we are drawing an edge, we want to be aware that we're not just drawing Ohio, but we're simultaneously drawing two things, or West Virginia, or Lake Erie. In drawing two things at once, rather than making the job more difficult, this gives you twice as much information in order to make your shapes accurate. To surrounding areas, Ohio is the negative shape. So we have to learn to adjust our focus. First, thinking about the negative shapes created by the placement of the subject on the page. Just by moving the subject around, we can create many different compositions and hopefully find the best possible solution. Some objects will appear to be much too complex to draw, but if we can just focus on the enclosed counters within the form and draw them carefully and accurately, the object will draw itself. It's therefore important to use the edge of the page to enclose and observe the peripheral areas as flat shapes. The phenomenon of the reversible figure ground shows that we can be presented with a puzzle that contains multiple solutions. We see a vase, and then we see profiles. Our mind flips back and forth. While we know both things are there, we only see one at a time. This happens with audio input as well. Say you are watching TV and someone is talking to you. You can focus your attention on one thing or the other, but you cannot understand both simultaneously. That is the myth of multitasking, which only works to a degree. Our task for the next exercise is to focus on and draw negative shapes. This does not mean drawing the positive shapes and then the leftovers become the negative shapes. This means only drawing what is not there. You must see the negative shape as an important thing and draw it exactly. Let the positive forms merge together. There must be no outlines between one positive form and another. The leaf must merge with the twig to become one thing. There must be no lines seen in the final drawing, only shapes. It helps to give your negative shapes meaning. Look for imaginary creatures in each shape. That will allow you to make them important in your mind and help you to draw them accurately. How thin is that leg? How long is that snout? What is the angle of that tail? So I try to visualize animals, profiles, forms, and give them meaning. So there's a shape in here which looks like this. I don't know if you see it, but when I was drawing this shape, I'm thinking that's an animal. This is a snout. There's a mouth. He's got a mouth. This is his ear. This is his neck. It's right in here. Spot between the watering can and some leaves. If I see this as a real thing, then it becomes important to me. I realize, how thick is that snout? How thin is that neck? And then I see that as a positive form, an important thing to draw, and to draw accurately. Carol Walker is a contemporary African-American artist who uses positive-negative shape and the tradition of cutout silhouettes to rewrite the history of colonial America. Look at the amazing character and storytelling capability within simple black and white shapes. These images could be fully rendered in light and shadow, but they are much more powerful and iconic, just as simple shape.